Quick ask. Subscribe now, then let's jump in with the numbers. Something feels different in Minnesota right now, and you don't need market reports to notice it. You feel it pulling into an open house that used to draw neighbors and weekend traffic, only to find a silent driveway and lights already turned off. You feel it scrolling listings after dinner, seeing the same homes, the same photos, the same promises, just quieter prices underneath, and fewer saves, fewer calls, fewer reasons to hurry. Minnesota was never supposed to be dramatic. It was the steady market, the safe one, the place people pointed to when they wanted proof that housing didn't have to swing wildly. Solid jobs, sensible buyers, predictable seasons. But in 2025, that stability feels strained. Not broken, not panicked, just stalled. Buyers aren't rushing in anymore. Sellers aren't slashing recklessly. And in that stillness, something important is happening. Demand is stepping back without announcing itself. This isn't a crash you hear on the news before you see it on your street. It shows up in homes sitting through snowmelt season. That should matter. In price reductions stacking quietly without restarting interest. In listings refreshed again and again instead of replaced by sold signs. When buyers disappear softly, outcomes tend to follow later, not sooner. So this video isn't here to scare you or predict disaster. It's here to sharpen your awareness. I'm going to walk you through 10 Minnesota cities where buyer activity has thinned dramatically in 2025. Not as headlines, but as signals. Because the people who protect themselves in moments like this aren't loud or early. They're patient, observant, and willing to let behavior replace belief. 2 cities on this list shocked me, and they'll challenge the idea that Midwest resilience automatically guarantees demand. That assumption breaks quietly when buyers stop showing up altogether without warning. Buyer demand didn't vanish in Minnesota because people stopped wanting homes. It faded because the math stopped working. After years of low rates trained buyers to stretch comfortably, 2025 reintroduced payment shock. Monthly costs jumped fast, not gradually. A house that felt reasonable suddenly demanded discipline. When numbers no longer feel forgiving, buyers don't rush or revolt. They pause, and pauses are enough to drain momentum from even the steadiest markets. Minnesota adds its own pressure. Property taxes bite harder here than many expect, rising quietly even when values stall. Insurance premiums climbed. Utility costs stayed unforgiving through winter extremes. Wages grew, but not fast enough to justify prices set during peak optimism. Sellers remember bidding wars. Buyers live inside spreadsheets. That gap between memory and math creates silence. Showings thin, offers disappear, transactions dry up without anyone declaring a crisis. This is what "no one is buying" actually looks like. Homes reduce prices and nothing happens. Reductions stack instead of clearing inventory. Sellers refresh listings, adjust language, offer small incentives, and wait. Buyers notice, but they don't respond. They watch. When price cuts fail to restart urgency, demand has already stepped aside. This isn't rejection, it's evaluation. And evaluation slows markets more effectively than fear ever could. There's also a quiet withdrawal happening beneath the surface. Investors pull back first when margins thin, and Minnesota has seen that retreat accelerate. Rental math tightened. Appreciation stories lost credibility. Small landlords stopped expanding. Without that extra layer of demand, listings linger longer than sellers expect. Over time, competition flips. Sellers aren't fighting buyers anymore. They're competing with each other for attention, and attention has become scarce. To keep this grounded, everything in this video rests on 4 buyer absence signals. First, transactions falling even as listings remain active. Second, price cuts repeating without producing offers. Third, days on market stretching because buyers feel no urgency. And fourth, incentives becoming routine rather than persuasive. When these appear together, buyer power has already shifted, whether sellers admit it or not. This structure matters because it replaces guesswork with clarity. Instead of reacting to headlines or hoping Minnesota behaves like it always has, you learn to read behavior in real time. Buyers aren't emotional right now, they're cautious. Sellers aren't desperate, they're confused. That imbalance creates opportunity for those who slow down. When you understand why buyers vanished, you stop taking silence personally and start interpreting it strategically. That's how you protect yourself from overpaying, while others wait for demand that isn't coming back on schedule. This isn't about predicting bottoms or sounding smart later. It's about timing and leverage. Minnesota didn't lose buyers forever. They stepped aside. And markets where buyers step aside don't reward urgency. They reward patience, verification, and discipline. That's the lens we'll use as we move city by city, watching where silence speaks louder than prices. Once you see that pattern, fear fades, confidence builds, and decisions slow enough to match reality instead of old expectations from last year pricing. Before naming cities, it matters how this countdown works, because random rankings create noise, not insight. Minnesota is not one housing market. It's a collection of behaviors responding differently to the same pressure, and once you group those behaviors correctly, the pattern stops feeling confusing and starts feeling predictable. The first zone is the Twin Cities core and inner ring suburbs. These areas carry the most price memory and the strongest belief in resilience. When buyers step back here, it doesn't look dramatic. Homes sit politely, cuts come slowly. Silence replaces urgency. That silence matters more than headlines. The second zone is the outer ring commuter cities. These markets were built on value, distance, and monthly payment math. When rates rose, that math broke first. Buyers didn't disappear emotionally, they disappeared practically. Commutes felt longer, payments felt heavier, and demand hesitated faster than sellers expected. The third zone is northern legacy and industrial towns. These markets react early because demand is thinner. When buyers pause, there's no cushion. Listings linger. Price discovery happens faster. What looks like weakness here is often the same pressure that arrives elsewhere later. The fourth zone is the southern and western growth corridors. These areas absorbed optimism, new construction, and migration narratives all at once. When demand slows, supply becomes visible. Similar homes compete side by side, and pricing adjusts through repetition rather than shock. That's why this list runs from number 10 to number 1. Cities aren't ranked by population, popularity, or reputation. They're ranked by signal stacking. One buyer-absent signal suggests caution. 2 signals suggest pressure. The final 3 cities show all 4 at once. Transactions drying up, repeated price cuts, longer days on market, and incentives failing to restart demand. This structure isn't about drama, it's about trust. When you understand how the list is built, you stop arguing with outcomes and start recognizing behavior. And yes, number 3 breaks the Midwest stability myth most people still believe. As we move forward, watch how often the same signals repeat across different zones. That repetition isn't coincidence. It's the market teaching you how to read it. When structure replaces emotion, patience replaces fear, and leverage becomes easier to see before everyone else notices it has already changed. This framework keeps decisions grounded, slows reactions, protects against narratives, and prepares you to evaluate each city calmly, without rushing, guessing, or borrowing confidence from yesterday's market conditions. We start this part of the list where nothing looks broken, but nothing feels urgent anymore. These are quiet stall markets, places where homes still list, signs still go up, and agents still host open houses, yet buyers hesitate just long enough to change outcomes. There's no panic here. There's pause. At number 10 is St. Cloud. Scroll listings or drive newer neighborhoods and everything looks fine at first glance. Clean homes, reasonable prices, steady presentation. But open houses feel thin, and listings linger longer than sellers expect. Demand thins here because buyers are more payment sensitive than sellers realize. Small price cuts appear, then sit. Sellers respond by refreshing photos or adjusting descriptions. The buyer takeaway is patience. When homes sit politely without urgency, leverage is quietly forming. Number 9 is Mankato, where the stall shows up through repetition. The same homes appear week after week, often with modest reductions that don't trigger action. Demand is thinning because buyers are weighing value more carefully, especially relative to local wages. Sellers respond by trimming slowly, hoping activity returns with seasonality. The buyer lesson is observation. Track which listings cut more than once, because those sellers negotiate first. At number 8 is Rochester. This one surprises people because of strong employment anchors and long-term confidence. But even solid fundamentals don't override payment math. Listings here sit longer and buyers take more time. Demand thins as high expectations meet cautious budgets. Sellers offer concessions instead of real price resets, protecting perceived value. The buyer takeaway is discipline. Let incentives accumulate before committing, and don't mistake stability for urgency. Number 7 is Duluth, where the stall feels emotional as much as financial. Listings still attract interest, but decisions slow down dramatically. Demand thins because discretionary buyers hesitate, especially when seasonal optimism fades. Sellers respond with small cuts and flexible terms, trying to keep momentum alive. The buyer takeaway is awareness. Watch how long listings linger after peak interest periods, because time reveals true demand. What connects these 4 cities isn't collapse, it's fatigue. Sellers wait, buyers wait longer. That waiting softens markets before it breaks them. Regret is still optional here, because pressure hasn't forced decisions yet. This stage matters more than it looks. Stall markets offer time, and time is the rarest advantage in housing cycles. You can observe without acting, compare without rushing, and walk away without consequence. These cities are teaching patience gently. The danger isn't missing out. It's acting too early because nothing looks wrong yet. In quiet stalls, signals whisper instead of shout. Buyers who listen now avoid paying yesterday's price in tomorrow's market. As we move up the list, hesitation becomes habit, and habit becomes pressure. For now, understand this phase clearly. These cities aren't broken. They're slowing. And slowing is how leverage changes hands before most people realize it already has. That realization is powerful because it shifts identity. You stop seeing yourself as late and start acting prepared. You stop competing emotionally and start negotiating calmly. In these markets, confidence grows from waiting, not winning bids. Those who rush absorb risk. Those who watch collect information. And information quietly gathered becomes leverage long before prices officially move. And certainty finally feels comfortable to everyone else watching from sidelines, without pressure or regret later for buyers. This is where the tone shifts, because in these cities, price cuts are no longer surprising, they're assumed. Buyers scroll listings expecting reductions, and sellers quietly prepare for negotiations that stretch far longer than planned. These are buyer-resistant zones, places that still look strong on paper, but feel heavy in practice. At number 6 is Bloomington. It remains well-located, familiar, and stable. Yet listings here tell a different story. Homes relist after stalled contracts. Price cuts stack without restoring urgency. Buyers hesitate because monthly payments feel misaligned with value, especially after taxes and insurance are added. Sellers respond with concessions, closing credits, and flexible terms. The warning label for Bloomington is alignment. Buyers return only when pricing reconnects with realistic monthly affordability. Number 5 is Burnsville, where resistance shows up through time rather than drama. Open houses draw interest, but decisions slow down. Negotiations stretch. Buyers walk after inspections more often. Demand weakens because buyers feel no pressure to commit quickly. Sellers trim cautiously, hoping the next showing converts. The warning label here is absorption. Stability requires listings to clear without repeated relaunches. At number 4 is Maple Grove, and this is where cognitive dissonance hits hardest. It's a desirable area with strong amenities, yet homes linger after multiple reductions. Buyers hesitate not because they dislike the homes, but because affordability math dominates emotion. Sellers offer incentives to protect list prices, but buyers remain patient. The warning label for Maple Grove is urgency. Until buyers feel pressure again, resistance remains. If this breakdown is helping you read the market more clearly, subscribe now, because the final 3 cities reveal where buyer absence turns into outright stagnation. What ties these resistance zones together is a shift in psychology. Buyers no longer fear missing out. They fear overpaying. Social proof flips quietly as fewer cars appear at open houses and more listings return unchanged. Silence replaces competition. These markets reward restraint. Acting quickly here doesn't secure deals. It absorbs risk. Waiting allows leverage to surface naturally as sellers adjust expectations. Buyer resistance zones teach a simple lesson. Great cities can still be wrong moments. As we move toward the final three, watch how these signals begin stacking faster. Price cuts repeat. Days on market stretch. Incentives normalize. That overlap is where resistance hardens into something more decisive. The question isn't whether these cities recover someday. It's whether buyers today are compensated for the risk they'd be taking right now. This phase tests discipline more than knowledge. It asks whether you can sit with uncertainty without forcing clarity too early. Buyers who rush seek relief, not value. Buyers who wait gather evidence. Every unsold week, every ignored reduction, every quiet open house adds information. Information compounds. It strengthens negotiation, sharpens timing, and reduces regret. You don't need confidence from others. Now you need confirmation from the market itself. That confirmation arrives slowly, but when it does, it changes everything for patient buyers. Waiting is not passive, it is strategic positioning in uncertain housing cycles. The buyers who win in phases like this aren't braver, they're calmer. They wait for confirmation, not reassurance. They let sellers prove flexibility before committing. In resistance zones, the market speaks softly before it speaks clearly. Listening now protects you from rushing into yesterday's prices with today's payments. This is the point where everything we've been watching stops feeling debatable. Earlier, cities showed hesitation, resistance, and delay. Here, demand has fully stepped away. The signals no longer rotate, they stack. Price cuts repeat. Days on market stretch uncomfortably long. Inventory rises quietly. Incentives appear and still don't pull buyers back. This isn't fear, it's disengagement, and that distinction matters. At number 3 is Egan. On the surface, it still looks balanced and familiar, but buyer behavior tells a different story. Engagement slowed because households hit affordability walls they couldn't justify crossing. Taxes, insurance, and rates compressed payments beyond comfort. Structurally, what's broken is trust in pricing. Buyers don't believe reductions are finished. The buyer playbook here is leverage with discipline. Negotiate price and credits together, demand inspection flexibility, and wait for proof that listings clear without layered incentives before believing stabilization has arrived. Number 2 is Brooklyn Park, where demand didn't fade, it thinned. Listings linger through multiple weekends. Reductions appear, then repeat. Buyers stopped engaging because value perception slipped relative to nearby alternatives. Structurally, inventory outpaced commitment. Too many options chase too few serious buyers. The buyer playbook here is patience plus comparison. Track relisted homes. Watch how many similar properties remain unsold after cuts. Confirmation only arrives when inventory compresses without sellers chasing each other down. If you want to avoid locking in regret at the wrong moment, subscribe now, because number 1 reframes how people see the Twin Cities entirely. At number 1 is the Twin Cities Outer Ring Fringe. This cluster carries every buyer absence signal at once. These areas relied on momentum, commuting optimism, and the assumption that affordability would always attract the next wave. In 2025, that chain broke. Buyers disengaged because distance stopped feeling worth the payment. Structurally, what's broken is absorption. New supply met hesitant demand, and incentives couldn't restart urgency. What you notice first is repetition. The same homes, the same streets, quieter prices each month. Sellers offer credits, rate buy-downs, flexible timelines, yet decisions don't follow. Buyers wait because they can. The buyer playbook. Here is restraint. Negotiate aggressively on price, contingencies, and concessions. Refuse emotional competition. Confirmation requires inventory clearing without incentives and days on market compressing naturally. Until then, patience holds leverage. This is the emotional resolution of the list. Not collapse, but exposure. When all signals align this clearly, the risk shifts to those who act early, not those who wait. The regret to avoid isn't missing out. It's committing to yesterday's pricing with today's reality. Markets like this don't punish caution, they reward it. Buyers who slow down gain clarity, control, and confidence, while others negotiate against their own urgency. That's the quiet advantage in 2025. Not speed, not bravery, but the ability to wait until numbers, behavior, and incentives finally align, signaling that demand hasn't just paused, but returned with intention, stability, and real buying power again. When you step back from individual cities and look at Minnesota as a whole, the pattern becomes calm, consistent, and impossible to ignore. None of these markets broke because of a single dramatic shock. They softened because overpricing finally collided with payment reality. Homes were listed as if money were still cheap, while buyers were budgeting as if money were tight, because it is. That gap quietly drained momentum. Inventory didn't surge overnight, it crept. One extra listing on a block, then another, then another. Sellers blamed seasonality, buyers delayed decisions. But housing markets don't need panic to change direction. They only need hesitation to slow velocity, and once velocity slows, urgency evaporates. Price cuts follow the same slow rhythm, not one decisive reset, but repeated reductions that gradually train buyers to wait. When cuts stop creating urgency, psychology flips. Buyers stop asking what they might miss and start asking what might get cheaper. That single shift reshapes behavior faster than any headline ever could. Days on market complete the picture. Healthy demand clears homes even when prices wobble. These didn't. Listings lingered. Weekends passed quietly. Open houses felt optional. Buyer disappearance doesn't look like a crash. It looks like silence spreading. Here's a portable checklist you can use anywhere in Minnesota. Track days on market trends, not just list prices. Watch how often homes cut and whether those cuts actually lead to sales. Notice when concessions become standard language instead of rare incentives. Compare rent to mortgage payments honestly. Pay attention to builder incentives because builders adjust first and pull resale pricing with them. This checklist isn't meant to scare you. It's meant to steady you. When you learn to read markets this way, you stop reacting emotionally and start choosing deliberately. Awareness becomes leverage. The most important takeaway is this: buyer disappearance rewards patience. Markets like these punish speed and protect restraint. When urgency fades, the advantage shifts to those willing to wait for confirmation instead of chasing reassurance. Minnesota isn't collapsing, it's recalibrating. And when you understand that difference, you stop guessing, slow down, and make decisions. When markets shift like this, the worst mistake is assuming everyone should act the same. Minnesota in 2025 rewards strategy, not speed, and what you do next depends on who you are and what you're protecting. If you're a first-time buyer, your advantage is patience. This is not the moment to chase listings or waive safeguards. Let sellers come to you. Ask for concessions before price. Watch for confirmation signals stacking together. Longer days on market, repeated cuts that fail to spark offers, and incentives becoming normal language. When those signs align, urgency has already left the room, and waiting stops feeling risky and starts feeling disciplined. If you're a move-up buyer, risk control matters more than lifestyle upgrades. Buying before selling ties you to two markets moving in opposite directions. Selling first restores leverage. Use contingencies as tools, not apologies. Price your exit realistically, protect your downside, and negotiate your next purchase from clarity instead of pressure. Control, not perfection, keeps regret out of decisions. For investors, 2025 demands realism. Vacancy risk matters more than appreciation stories. Run rent math conservatively, not optimistically. If a deal only works with future growth assumptions, walk away. Liquidity is protection, not missed opportunity. Minnesota markets reward investors who can wait longer than sellers can. Across all paths, the identity shift is the same. Patience is no longer passive. It's power. It allows you to say no without fear and yes without pressure. It turns uncertainty into optionality. Minnesota isn't offering guarantees this year. It's offering information. Those who slow down, verify signals, and resist urgency gain flexibility, while others chase certainty. In the next video, we'll compare Twin Cities demand against other Midwest markets and break down which Minnesota cities buyers should avoid next. Subscribe, share your city in the comments, and join the conversation. This community works because shared observation beats noise, and your experience helps others navigate this market with clarity, confidence, and better timing. Together, we learn faster, avoid emotional mistakes, Build smarter strategies and turn uncertainty into advantage by thinking clearly, acting patiently, and sharing insight before headlines.